In a quarter mile, you will arrive at your destination.
Well, a quarter mile. Red Oak Cemetery. Photographed, vandalized several years ago. So I am driving on Roosevelt Highway. Right now heading.
You have arrived.
Whoa!
Follow you down to the red oak tree as the air moves thick through the hollow reeds. I will wait for you there until someone comes to carry me down. See, I have not grown cold. I have stole from men who have stole from those, with their arms so thin and their skin so cold. We were young, you were young, you were young. And somebody laughs like it's all just for hell, like we could not be saved from the depths of the well. But this cloth that I make is a cloth you can sell. Pay for the ghost of mercy, no.
After a cemetery like this one right here, Red Oak Cemetery here in South Fulton County near Atlanta, when it gets vandalized, there are numerous problems. Obviously the damage, the money, there's all kinds of major stuff going on. There are problems when you have vandalism, not the least of which that you're desecrating someone's final resting place, you're destroying property, it's against the law, you go to jail, you pay fines, it's pretty bad. But as a find a great person, trying to make the best of the situation, what I've tried to do is get inscriptions face up. Sometimes when they push these things over, the inscriptions are face down, and I don't know who's on it, and I can't record it if I can't see an inscription, and these headstones are heavy. So I flipped a few. Let me show you one I flipped, and let me show you the ones I couldn't flip for obvious reasons. All right, so let's start with this one. Oh dear, it's just so sad. But if you'll look, it's quite heavy. This thing is, it's a monster. It's not a one-man job, this guy right here. So there's no way for me to lift that, believe me. It would take at least 2 strong men probably to lift this, unless you've got Hulk Hogan or something. All right, so now we go over here. Now with this one I did something weird. Under that crack, I stuck this Action 4 and tried to see if I could see an inscription, but even leaning like that I was unable to budge it. Okay, I was able to flip this one because it was leaning up enough that I could get it to move. I budged it and then I just pushed until it slid and rolled over. But that's the problem you face, folks, when you've got a cemetery that's been desecrated and people are shoving or kicking over headstones. Well, as a find a great person who can't fix this, I don't have the resources to fix this, and obviously East Point hasn't come in here and fixed it. It's been, what, 6 years, 8 years? I don't know, since it started. It doesn't look particularly worse than it did, but here she is. Hey, Gino.
What's up?
Patricia and whoever else is watching, Bill is going to be watching and he is monitoring. He knows the history of the area, Bill Grubbs, and he's going to be watching this. So I'm going to put it on pause. There we go. How are y'all doing? Hey, Bill's got on his uniform. All right. How you doing, man? What kind of hat is that?
Starfleet Academy.
Starfleet Academy. Starfleet? Oh, that's...
It's an anachronistic hat.
Yeah. Isn't Starfleet like Star Trek? Okay, so we have everything running. What you just saw was a short video I made about 2 hours ago at the cemetery. I went there. I didn't find it in much generally different condition than it was when I was working with it like 3 years ago, Patricia. Watching the cemetery, going through it, we've got 2 KKK inscriptions and some other stuff that are related to the Klan. And other groups that at the time were whites only. This cemetery has been vandalized. And my question, of course, when I found it in that condition was, did they vandalize it because there were KKK members or perhaps even slave owners in that particular cemetery? I didn't know. So I just started doing some research. You will be able to see a news report, a live video news report in my presentation, and pictures of the vandalism and what I want you to do. Are you ready? I want you, unless you've seen this before, and then I want you to keep your mouth shut. But if you haven't seen it before and you're looking at it for the first time, the question is, who's doing this and why? Because there's as many as 100 headstones in there that are down. I mean, they're down. 100 out of 500 and something. And so why'd they pick the ones they pick? Why'd they do it? You know, what are we looking at here? Is this a statement? Is this protest? Is this activism? Is this mischief? Is this just delinquency from some minors? So let me play this thing, this little PowerPoint presentation, and we will go from there. Okay, so this is one of the ones you're going to be looking for. I gave you 3 different angles on the same thing here. Notice that it's cracked. I don't know if you can see the crack or not, but it goes right above between the name and Oakland, right along that border between Oakland City 297 and W.R. Nicholson. There is a border, and that border has a crack in it. So I put the top. It's in 2 pieces. I put it back on top, and when I arrived, it was still sitting on there. So I presume no one's moved it, or if they did, someone put it back up. But someone did kick this one. And instead of knocking it over, it snapped. It snapped right in the middle. So the top of it was, you notice the cartoon at the top? Can you tell what it is?
Klan. Hooded Klan member.
Man on horseback.
Klansman on horseback, yeah. And well, I'll say more about it when we get to it. All right, so here's another guy. This is the other KKKer that has an inscription as such. Now, there may be other people who members of and sympathizers with the KKK. In that cemetery, but only 2 of the headstones that I found actually had KKK on the actual cemetery. I mean, these guys aren't hiding the fact that they're in the Klan; they're proud of it. So we've got a crime scene investigation here, folks. Who's vandalizing this cemetery, and why are they picking the headstones that they do? And is this a statement of activism, or is this just midnight mischief? Why are they knocking some of these over? Red Oak Cemetery is about 10 miles south of here, just under 10 miles south of here. It took me 15 minutes in the rain and traffic to get there and 15 minutes to get back. It's really close. So there's the cemetery I went to today. All those trees are gone. Red Oak Cemetery is at the Blue X in terms of Atlanta. It's southwest Atlanta. And as you can see, it's near an intersection of two major interstates, Interstate 85 and Interstate 285. And the cemetery is at the top. That red arrow is pointing to a little green square, sort of square-looking area. That's the cemetery. I'm going to zoom into it. There it is. And there it is at about 100 feet. That's where I was today. All those trees are gone. And here is our news report. Okay, there we go.
How awful this is. Headstones knocked over, graves destroyed. A local official called the people who vandalized this cemetery here wicked. Channel 2's Tom Jones is live in the city of South Fulton, where it appears the vandals went after more than 50 plots. Tom, this is disgusting.
It is, Wendy. It is tough to rest in peace when your headstones are toppled over like this and damaged, and also when your grave is disturbed like this one. A viewer called me about the vandalism, so I called the councilwoman for this area. She came out and was very disturbed by what she saw.
I think whoever did this is wicked.
It's supposed to be a place where those who have left this earth,
Respect the dead.
are expected to rest in eternal peace. But vandals have made it loud and clear, peace is the last thing on their minds.
And you see that one, it looks like they not only tried to knock it down, but dig in the grave.
A viewer called me saying he noticed vandalism at the Red Oak Cemetery on Roosevelt Highway getting progressively worse. Some 50 headstones were knocked over, some destroyed. Graves have been disturbed. The door to this mausoleum torn off.
I just was shocked to find out the level of vandalism.
Councilwoman Helen Zenobia Willis says prominent people from as far back as the 1800s are buried here.
I couldn't believe we actually have a Superior Court judge from the early 1900s.
She says the group that maintains the cemetery came to the city last August complaining about repeated vandalism. Willis says they want to restore the headstones, but first she wants the historic cemetery made secure. She wants cameras and a fence around it.
We're going to look into placing some lighting.
All in an effort to protect those laid to rest here and to catch those who are bent on disturbing their peace.
I want whoever's doing this to be caught, prosecuted.
About an hour ago, I spoke to a man who says his family is laid to rest here. He says their grave sites have been vandalized twice. He supports adding barbed wire fencing around this cemetery. I'll be working on that for the next hour. We're live in the city of South Fulton. Tom Jones, Channel 2 Action News.
It's awful.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, why aren't there cameras out there? Why isn't there a fence? Are they clearing those trees for something else? Maybe they're going to put up a security wall of some kind. I don't know what they're going to do. But they've done nothing, and it's been 4 years since it first started, 4 or 5 years since they first started vandalizing it. I've been out there maybe, including the 1 or 2 times we went, Patricia, maybe 8 times. So the councilwoman is Helen Willis. I didn't speak with her. I spoke with a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She was supposed to get back to me and to do a follow-up. They talked about a judge being buried here, but I think the most famous person buried here is this guy. His name's John McAfee Chapman. John made a fortune. He's an Atlanta guy who made a fortune, and this is how. And around 1894, he finished high school, and he started to work for a pharmacist. And the pharmacist, Edmondson, was involved in the bicycle craze, which was going on at the time in the late 1800s. There was a new sport, bicycle racing, that was taking off, and Chapman took advantage of the popularity and ran with it. He became Atlanta's fastest, best-known wheelman. And he won races, and the Constitution wrote about him winning and how everybody went crazy at Piedmont Park, where they used to, and you know where the field is at Piedmont Park? They used to have a racing track there, downtown Atlanta. And it's and they wrote, Con Baker took the lead with a mighty effort, led the racers around for 1 lap. Russell, is that Walther? Walther was playing a close second, Carpenter third, and Chapman fourth. Suddenly, Chapman sprang into second place, and then within 5 feet of the line, Chapman forced his wheel just a fraction in front of Baker's. The top crowd went wild, and they put a picture of it in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on the left. Imagine that being in Piedmont Park. It's just crazy to think about. 2,000 people yelled themselves crazy. And there's a picture of the guy. He was the czar of Atlanta cycling, and he raced all over the country. He set world records. He's a promoter of the sport. He expanded to New York, New Jersey, Utah, Las Vegas, lots of other places. And he managed the original Madison Square Garden, where he not only did cycling, but promoted boxing matches and other sporting events as well. That guy is buried here. Now, how did I get interested in this cemetery? Well, I'm interested in all cemeteries because I'm a volunteer for findagrave.com, which you can see on the screen there. In 2010, I was appointed to Owl Rock. They have a beautiful cemetery in the back. That's it on the right, upper right. That's Owl Rock Methodist Church, lower right, from many years ago. I joined Find a Grave and because I got interested in our cemetery. And so I started noticing that there were some other cemeteries in the area that needed recording, and I got after it. In September of 2018, and I was like, this is 500 graves. It's just physically impossible in the middle of the heat like that. I mean, it was hot in September, and I just couldn't do it. I thought, but I did. I went and got a whole bunch of Gatorade, and I took all the pictures. I just tried to take pictures of every single inscription that I could. There's the Red Oak Cemetery on Find a Grave, and that number is probably incorrect now. This was taken a few years ago. But that's where I record all the information on these folks, like this information. On Issachar Cook, a private in Company F, he was in the Confederate States of America Army. And that's his headstone on the left before being vandalized. And I took the picture on the right after the Vandals came and knocked down everything.
Looks like marble to me.
It does. And you know how heavy that is. I mean, it's some dense stuff. I mean, I'm not moving it. The only good news here, if there's any, is that when they knocked it over, the headstone was face up, and I still was able to read the inscription. Here's a picture of the police from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution walking around, and I don't know, man. I hope they're collecting evidence of some kind. I don't know what he was thinking, but I think they missed some things, and I want you to see if you can find it. This is the city of Fulton police. There were no witnesses. Perpetrators will sometimes brag, so the police are hoping somebody will hear something and turn them in. The reward was $3,000 at the time, but it went up to $10,000. What we want to look at is the physical evidence. And so when you look at physical evidence at a crime scene, you're looking for things that might have been left by the vandals, like cigarette butts, garments, tools. But that may or may not help you unless you identify to whom they belong. You're not going to get DNA and fingerprints and shoe prints and tire prints going on with the police on a situation like this because nobody was killed. It's not, it's not that kind of crime. Analyzing the crime scene can be helpful. There may be evidence like, what does it look like caused the damage? How was it caused? Do you see tire marks? Maybe they pulled it over with a tractor. Well, you got no tire marks that were there. Did they shove them? Did they kick them? Did they hammer them? Did they ram them? What did they do? What does the evidence show concerning the perpetrators? We want to look at method. We want to look at motive. Is this a thrill thing, a revenge thing, a hate thing, or a protest thing? We want to look at the message. What's the message being sent? Did they leave signatures with a magic marker? Did they spray paint any symbols that we could recognize? Did anyone claim responsibility? No, nobody ever did. Was this one or two or three or more events? It was several. It was at least three. Yeah, and how come some of these are pushed over and some of them aren't? I mean, clearly more are not pushed over than are. To combat future incidents, here's a cemetery, a much bigger one, that uses cameras and walls and fences. So I guess that's the direction they should go in, along with security lights. But they've done nothing other than chop down the trees so far, and I don't know why they did that. So there's a difference. There are differences between these terms, but desecration is vandalizing something sacred like a cemetery, a headstone. Defacing is when you change the appearance of something either by smashing it or pouring paint on it or something like that. Vandalism is destruction of damage or of any kind to a public or private property. Most states categorize vandalism a misdemeanor, $500, $250 fines. Sometimes a year in local jail is possible, but people, are going to bail out. What's this? People have painted a German Nazi swastika on these Jewish headstones. Clearly a hate crime, but also it's vandalism. I mean, it's a specific kind of vandalism. It's hate crime because these were defaced because they're Jewish. The swastika says so. The Nazis killed 6 million Jews. They hated Jews. This is a hate crime. Vandals have been convicted of terrorism at times because if you blow up an abortion clinic, obviously you're trying to scare people from going to abortion clinics. No matter how you feel about what your position is on abortion, It is illegal to blow up buildings, especially if there are people in them. Okay, so what are you penalties for specifically a cemetery? You could get $5,000 like a St. Louis man did for turning over 120 stones. Man, you got to be drunk to do stuff like this. I mean, you got to be a crackhead or something. A Nebraska man served 60 days and paid $10,000. Michigan 19-year-olds were ordered to pay a lot of money. So the question is, who done it? How, they knocked over these, but they didn't knock over the others in the background. Why? Keep pondering it. Look at these and look at the ones that are down and look at the ones that aren't. Red Oak Cemetery was also known as Red Oak Christian Church Cemetery and Mims Cemetery. I counted 75 plus headstones toppled. I was doing it fast and I might have missed a few. I don't know. But there's a guy, Doug Brown, who's with the veteran camp. He's the Sons of the Confederate Veterans Camp Commander, Doug Brown. He reported that more than 100 headstones were downed or damaged. Yeah, here are a couple of more. And so, I mean, can we tell anything from this crime scene? Do we have evidence of something that we should look at? A pattern, a motive, a purpose, a message? What do you see? As you look at these pics, look for something that sheds light on this case. Let's look back at this one. That's interesting. Okay, all of them are down. The one on the left that's still standing, I stood it up. It's actually supposed to be on the podium, and I can't lift it. I just couldn't get a grip, and I'm not well enough right now. I'm not strong enough to do it, even if I did get a grip. Why are some of these standing and some of them aren't? It's really mysterious. Look at this. It's just as sad as it can be. Look at the ones on the right. There are 1, 2, 3 up there standing and 2 down. I don't know. It gave way. Look how many are still standing. But look at the ones that are down. Why are they different? Were they singled out? Now, does anybody have a theory about this? What happened here? Why is there a hole in this grave in front of a toppled headstone for Matthew A. Alexander? Why? What if you have a couple of guys standing right there where the hole is? Maybe you got 3 or 4 guys and they're all standing there. And the guy over there on the right was pushing really hard. And before the headstone toppled, the grave gave way and he slid in. It gave way from the pressure that he was placing on the headstone, which is itself much heavier than the loose porous concrete that's over this crypt. So it broke instead of the headstone, but they still managed to knock the headstone over, as you can see. So somebody, talk about instant karma, right? You're trying to knock over headstones and you fall in the grave. Well, good. Good. All right, so what do we got here? This is Bobby Mims. She's a 2-year-old girl, and her crypt is all banged up. Buried in 1872. She's the early. 1872 is the earliest year of death on any headstone at Red Oak, which means that she was the last Mims to be laid rest here, and then Eugenia Mims not long after that, about a year. These 2 Mims girls were the first burials at the cemetery, so far as I can tell, and 25 persons are named Mims here, and that's why it was originally called Mims Cemetery. This is Bobby's. This vandalism is old. You can tell by the breaks that this was not done recently. See how the breaks have worn and weathered? They're the same color as the top. This is old damage. Okay. So 1872 is after the Civil War. Slavery ended after the Civil War. U.S. slaves were freed, emancipated after the Civil War around 1865. But I found 2 slave owners here. They were older, they were brothers, and they were both Mims. Why was I looking for slave owners? Because of her. Melissa Stern and I were in a conversation trying to figure out, it was her theory in the paper that they attacked it because there were slave owners there. But it was very difficult to find out whether there were slave owners there, and there were only two. And everybody buried there was buried after the Civil War, so there were no slaves at the time they were buried. But that's the facts. Melissa told me, because the slave owners were buried there, she asked whether they were. I told her I didn't know, so that's why I was doing the research. And she said, wow, I sent her my research. And she said, this is amazing and fascinating. Thank you so much. I'll get back to you, which she didn't do. She said, I don't think the Vandals are targeting specific headstones either. I think they likely heard who was buried there. You know, who knows? I don't, we'll see. She said she'd appreciate the information. She said she'd be in touch when the restorations begin. If those trees being cleared are part of the restoration, they have begun. If they're not, they haven't. What did I find? These are the slave owners. To be a slave owner, one had to have been born about 1840. So I was looking for anybody born in 1840 or before. I researched all 32 people who were buried there before that and who were born before that. And I came up with just two people, and they did own slaves. As you can see back here on this one, one of them had 6 slaves and the other had 21 slaves. They were the only ones. And slaves were expensive, and they obviously had large farms, and that's the way they employed the slaves, was on large plantations for the most part. David Mims, 2 small children. By the way, as you can see, their headstones have not been harmed in any way. So what does that tell you? What does it tell you that the only 2 slave owners at that particular cemetery have headstones and graves that are undisturbed and unmolested? What does it tell you? That whoever was doing this to the cemetery did not know. Mm-hmm. And they are not targeting anyone in particular. I love this one. I won't go into detail, but right after the first vandalism, I think somebody came in there and removed their loved one's headstone and laid it down and cleaned it. Because that is a pristine headstone. And I think they laid it down just so someone wouldn't come along and smash it. I thought that was smart. There's not a Civil War veteran buried here who has a headstone that is molested. I don't think. I didn't see one. I didn't see one today either. Now to our Klansmen. Here's one of them. Nothing prepared me for this. This is his lying down. Note the inscription on the side of this fallen monument. KKK, BPOE, FLT, Moose, DA, Cassells. There's a picture on the right taken by someone else a few years ago before it was knocked down. The headstones around it were knocked down too. This one was not given special attention. What does KKK, BPOE, FLT, Moose, WOW stand for?
It's fraternal organizations.
Yeah, they're fraternal organizations. That's correct. Anyway, this guy's name is Dubro A. Red Cassell, or I guess it's Cassell. His nickname was Red. How appropriate for a guy in the KKK, right? Short for redneck, I guess. I don't know. But it says that he was a member of the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks. It was a whites-only fraternal and charitable society known for its Americanism and Protestantism. It is now integrated and has been since the 70s. FLT stands for Faith, Love, and Truth. It's the motto of the Triple Link Fraternity, which is most frequently called the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, which I'd never heard of when I first researched this, but it's a social service and recreational club credited with being the first fraternal organization in the U.S. to open its membership to women in 1851, yet it retained its whites-only membership until 1971. And Moose, you know what the Moose is. They allowed blacks and women to begin to come in the 70s. WOW is Woodmen of the World Memorial. Those memorials are shaped like the trunk of a tree. You get one free when you buy their insurance. It was sort of a perk. And a lot of people have their insurance even today with Woodmen of the World. It still exists, and they will do insurance for anyone, not just white men. This is Teddy's Rough Riders, and kind of forgotten by history, but you know, they were down there in San Juan Hill fighting in Cuba. And what you can't see is the regiment that is credited with probably with making a decisive victory for the U.S., and it was a black regiment. According to history, they stood over the left while the white guys were photographed. And so the Klan begins to grow in 1915. It starts in Stone Mountain, believe it or not, and it grew to be a very, very powerful movement in the 1920s. They were for the prohibition of alcohol. They were anti-Catholic, anti-Semitic, and anti-communist. They were also anti-foreigner, anti-black, about anti-everything you can imagine, except white. Interestingly, Klan's members made it to some of the highest offices in the land. You are looking at a U.S. Senator, a Supreme Court Justice, a governor of Indiana, and a governor of Colorado, all members of the Klan. In fact, it was difficult to get elected if you weren't in the Klan in the 20s because it was considered patriotic. The Klan today is not very effective and are not very numerous. As you can see, the numbers have changed significantly. While the U.S. population has grown to 3.25 million, the Klan has gone from 5 million down to 3,000, which means they're 0.09% of our population, and yet we worry about them a lot, don't we? He was at San Juan Hill, by the way. That's why I put this here. The Klansman, Red Cassell, he was at San Juan Hill, but I don't know what he looks like, so I don't know if he's in the picture. The third Klan started in the 70s as there was a reaction to Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. So in the 50s and 60s, they had a little bit of a resurgence, which explains why in the 1970s, Cassell has KKK and all these other white-only organizations on his Woodmen of the World monument. Here's the other Klansman. 4Ks, it has the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, 4Ks. And he's not ashamed of being a Klansman. He gave his address, Oakland City 297. Not ashamed at all. And here's a Klan cartoon for you. 3 hooded Klansmen riding through the night. The white thing at the top is supposed to be the smoke coming out of their torch. Can you see the horse? And yeah. And that's the bottom of it. And it reads, "He served and sacrificed for the right." Well, I mean, if hating and lynching and enslaving black people's right, then okay. But that's the way he saw it. That's the way his peers saw it. Now, I put it back on top. You see it's broken, right? You see it's broken. So I put it back up. And it's been there, I think, unless someone has replaced it many times, which is possible, but I think it's still sitting up there because I protected it by putting this on top, by putting it back on top. I think it's safer there. And it didn't blow down, it's heavy. And so you see James Vernon's photo shows it in one piece. That's 2015. And in 2017, it was broken. And I put it back up. Are these vandals? Here are my conclusions. Vandalism shows no evidence the headstones were individually targeted. While a few smaller headstones were attacked, the focus seems to have been on the bigger ones, meaning the vandals were toppling the largest ones they could. Some of the largest headstones remain standing only because they probably proved to be too sturdy to budge. So I'm guessing, this is my theory, a small group of young people have been competing to tip the largest headstone, and this is a neighborhood naughtiness, midnight mischief game. This is not activism. I don't think the kids who did this were sending a message. They were just having fun, their idea of fun. I've got a lot more here, but I'm going to stop there. Let's talk. Hello to Ray Pelot. Is that French, Pelot, or do we pronounce it the American way, pellet. I don't know. These people are sorry sacks for doing this to any grave, period. Sorry sacks I thought that was a British term. Are you from England, sir? Sorry sacks. I love that. So, share with me your thoughts and feelings about what's going on with the Red Oak Cemetery, or anything to do with what you've seen. Heather, Patricia, Gino, Ben, you're who I've got right now. Not Ben, it's Bill, but if he wants me to call him Ben, I will. Hey, Ben!
Hey, I think they're doing it for enjoyment.
I agree.
Young people.
Young people having fun, just causing
Yeah.
trouble for fun, trying not to get caught. You'd think they would talk at school and someone would turn them in, but so far as I know, they didn't.
Yeah, too young to understand the gravity of the situation.
Or to appreciate the respect honored and due the sacred grounds like this.
Hmm.
It's a shame.
No beer bottles found.
I don't remember seeing any at the time. I don't remember seeing anything that would give it away, other than they were not paying attention to whether or not they knocked them over face down or face up. They were not paying attention to whose name or what organizations they belong to as inscribed on the headstones. They were kicking and pushing. And, if it wouldn't go over, they just went to the next one. And if it looked too easy, they just left it alone. They might have even been competing, Bill, to see who could knock over the biggest one.
Tombstone
Hard to
Olympics.
say, but yeah.
What do you think, Gene?
Tombstone Olympics.
Yeah, Tombstone Tipping Olympics.
So what's the closest drinking establishment, college campus, or teenage hangout place to this cemetery?
I don't know. There's a big neighborhood there.
Okay.
I looked at the income and population. It's a little bit depressed down there.
I'm just thinking bored kids, possibly under the influence of a bottle, like Bill said.
I don't know. I don't know who it was. I don't care. I just wish people would show a little respect. I hate that it's still lying there like that after what, 7 years?
I'm curious to hear from Heather as a historian. I don't know if you've done cemeteries. I'm curious about your knowledge around the history of KKK and cemeteries and what we've seen tonight.
Yeah, I think this was probably just kids. I don't think they knew enough, even if they had a point of view, right, about who was buried there. It doesn't seem like it was targeted, because I feel like there would have been some graffiti or something like that. I mean, I'm always fascinated by all of the fraternal orders and clubs that are chiseled into monuments and things. I was just thinking about it for myself. Like, is that something when I pass someday, am I going to want, would I even think to have that chiseled on the side of my tomb? But that really fascinates me, because clearly it's something that not only the guy, like, who belonged to all of those racist and oppressive groups was proud of, but his family must have been, or they wouldn't have put that on his tombstone, right? Like, it's meant to commemorate a life.
You could almost make some sort of indie movie about one of these headstones. You could just kind of tell the backstory, because I can imagine that there were people in Red's family who thought that he was a racist jerk, and and he probably had it in his will that what he wanted on his headstone, and they, can you imagine one of his daughters just having a fit? There's no way we're going to put that on there, but maybe, she was outnumbered, or maybe because he legally said, I want the KKK on my headstone, or maybe the whole family did it and he never said. Maybe they did it because they were proud.
Exactly.
That he was in there. It's like, we don't know. And by the time he died, I mean, with his beliefs, I would think that, he would be fairly isolated and would try to stick to his narrow circles, because otherwise he would be considered a pariah.
But I think that in that time, it's right there along with his military service, right? Or the other things that, someone would be proud of. Nationalism, which was, of course, is always big. And I just think it's interesting that because it's expensive to engrave tombstones, even if you were rich at the time. It's just interesting that, it's like, okay, these are the things you're not talking about. You were a father or, other things, milestones about your life. It's groups you belong to.
Or a disciple of Jesus.
Exactly.
How about a cross or a flag? Maybe they could have put an American flag. I mean,
Nothing about that.
what's
So
here really
I think
is
that's
just,
really interesting.
it's sort of like a LinkedIn bio resume list of all of the civic organizations I'm proud of being a member of. I mean, what, that ends up on your headstone, really?
I mean, it's a statement. Like, I just think that's
Yeah, I mean, he's publicizing it. This is a billboard for the Klan. I mean, it's like in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, I think it should stay there. We should learn from the past. We shouldn't destroy it. We should look at it, realize it is what it is, do some good education with people, fact check it, do education, and remember that this is the way the past used to be. Why are we whitewashing the past? That's the wrong word to use.
I mean, I think it still is to some degree. I found myself and have been trying to pay attention to my feelings. So watched this and I feel myself very frustrated and angry and upset of a lot of it as I see the headstones. And I wonder if, I know we're guessing around, kids may have just knocked them over. But I also have another thought that maybe kids are upset with what has happened. And if they see KKK stones being these monuments there, from what they've been told and taught from their parents and grandparents, they have feelings around that too, and may have knocked them over. I mean, we're all guessing. I don't know, but I wonder, and it may not be true because, I mean, we don't know what the aim was, and there are some with the KKK knocked over and then others are not. And then, I mean, they probably didn't know the two that were standing were slaves. And I don't know. So I think we're all guessing here, but I find
the two standings were slave owners, not slaves.
Slave owners, yes. Yeah, thank you. But I find myself thinking back to this season of Lent that we're in, and on Sunday, what I was sharing with the church and with you being out around Palm Sunday, 1 week, they were saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then the next week, crucify him. So people change very quickly around what's happening or who's in charge or the order of the day, I guess. But and what does Jesus say about all of this, about how we're treated, about racism and what happened back then and what's happening today? That's where I go to, and why we're still dealing with it today with all of the teachings that we're having around how Jesus loved everyone regardless, and how some people are still being ridiculed, and people would just look at me for the darkness of my complexion and just hate me and don't know anything about me or who I am, the person inward, and would just hate. I mean, the people lived that way and died that way.
Yeah,
so,
Red's dead. But
that's where I go. So, but I get upset, and I'm just very curious about my own feelings and why I'm feeling the way that I do right now. So I'm just trying to pay attention to that, and trying to reflect on that.
I feel that same way, Patricia. And I was thinking about, like, when Bert said, "Oh, and I put the tombstone, the headstone back up." I was like, "Why? I would have left it down." That was my gut reaction. But then I had to stop myself and think,
I did. I left it down for a while. I went the second time. I thought it over again,
and I had to think for a minute to myself, like, okay, Heather. However, if we're saying it's a sacred space and all of God's children, even the worst of us, are worthy, then who am I to say, right? And it's hard because, of course, I hate the thought of dread. I hate the thought of that person. However, he's a child of God. His family, loved him. I don't know. It's just always something to wrestle with. Mm-hmm. Such a deeply flawed, in my opinion, person. But acknowledging that they also deserve some level of dignity and respect.
They do, and that's why I invited, Patricia to go down there with me. I don't remember when or why we went, but I definitely wanted her to see that, and she was interested after she saw my presentation, and we went, and you saw both of those KKK inscriptions live and in person. And do you recall what that was like, and what that made you think or feel?
I think very similar that I feel today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
But it's very hard to experience that and to see that and to just imagine. And some of the movies that I've watched and would have read, I don't know a whole lot about American history, but I do know enough to know about, the lynching that went on and some of the stories and how hard that was. I know how hard it was for me growing up out of my own story. The racism and the colorism. I mean, so there's a mixture of all of that in there because of one's complexion that you cannot control. It's like I was born into this body and I could do nothing about it. And not that I want to do anything about it right now. I did as a child because I did not want to suffer the way I suffered when I saw the lighter children being treated differently. I wanted to be like them. That you cannot even imagine how hard that was. And so for me now, as I watch this presentation and I think back, I mean, how could I just ignore? And so, yeah, I have a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings around these things when we talk about it. It just brings up so much for me.
I watched you walk up to the second one, the one that was broken, the little headstone that has the cartoon at the top of the hooded ones. I watched you walk up to it and stare at it. And it's one of those moments where I would have given anything to read your mind. Because I was like, you're staring at KKKK, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, on a headstone in a cemetery in Atlanta, and you're from the Bahamas, and you're staring at that going, okay, that just happened.
It's very real. I don't know if you remember when we went to see 12 Years a Slave.
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, you almost had to lift me out of the theater.
It was pretty bad.
It was extremely hard to see that and watch it. Extremely, because it's so much of my own story. It resonates with my own story. And it's just very real for me. And I don't think a lot of people understand. And it's like, well, we're in a different time now. Yes, we are, but a lot still has not changed. I am still experiencing things on my job. As educated as I am, and I'm qualified to be where I am, some of the same things you may experience, and just
sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's not. One time we went carpet shopping, and they refused to serve us.
Yeah, it's very real.
They didn't say why, but we kind of know.
We figured it out. They didn't believe in interracial marriage.
It's the only time that's happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it still happens,
Yeah.
I certainly, when I went to that cemetery and was trying to do my good deed for the day, and record people's names and dates onto Find a Grave so that there's a record for posterity. I'm just out there doing my thing and happy to do it. And I look at that headstone and go, holy cow, is that for real? I mean, it looks like a stage prop. It's so glaring and surprising. And I looked online, and there aren't a great deal of them. I mean, I don't find a whole lot of them, but they are out there. They're all around the South. you know. I was wondering if Bill had seen, Bill, have you seen the Klan in symbol or in word or in abbreviation on any headstones other than the two I just showed?
I can't recall any.
I can't either. The only ones I've ever seen, I had to search for them online. I've never seen one in person before.
I'll tell you what, I've seen a Confederate flag on a black man's headstone.
That's interesting. How did that happen?
It's hard to say, but it's in Westview Cemetery, and the history group knows all about it. I've got pictures of it somewhere. I was murdered.
And he had a Confederate flag on the grave, on the headstone?
Yeah, in color.
Makes you wonder whether he wanted that or if somebody down at the funeral home thought it'd be funny to put a Confederate flag on a black man's grave.
Yeah, that's interesting.
No, the SCV paid for the stone.
Who did?
Doug Brown and his crowd.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So they got a stone for him.
They paid for the stone, yeah.
Okay. I didn't even know about that. But I would like to, I'd like to have a conversation with some of these cemetery associations. And it's not around racism or the Klan. It's around you guys need to get in there and do your jobs. You can't even get into some of these cemeteries for all of the briars and the weeds and the bushes. They're completely, you talk about disrespectful. One of these days, go to the Connolly Cemetery over in East Point, or even better yet, go to College View Memorial Park. Horrible condition this cemetery is in. And if you go to find a grave and you click cemeteries, there's a map that shows you all the cemeteries close to you. And you can just look at all of them. And there are hidden cemeteries in your neighborhood. It's really strange. You can find a lot. And I recommend anybody who is able physically to do it, to go to cemeteries and photograph the headstones and be a volunteer for Find a Grave, because we're going to lose these cemeteries. And once they're gone, we won't have the information. So get the information, take a picture, and just upload it. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's easier than paying a bill or buying something in Amazon. It's easier than that. Gino, where's your nearest cemetery?
Pleasant Grove, right up 2 miles from here.
It's a fascinating, once you get into it, it's a little bit addictive. You can really feel history in these places. You can imagine the people and their time and what they were going through. And Red Cassell was a man of his time. He was, born of the KKK in the 20s, and he was a part of the resurgence in the 60s, and he died a KKK member in 1970. And you know what? In 1970, I was in the 7th grade, and good old Red was dying 10 miles away down the street. A Klan member. Crazy. You'll have a great evening, Heather. Thank you. Patricia, thank you. Gino, thank you. And especially, his name's not Ben Hill, but thank you, Ben Hill.